Hello, football family. Welcome into Huddle It Up Films. Very special day for me. Exciting day. Here with the football scout, Sanji. Raiders covered the Raiders for a long time here on YouTube. And the Ravens, of course, football scout knows, has three former Raiders in here vying for different positions. So I'm going to bring him in, pick his brain. He studied all these guys. He knows them better than me. So first of all, Sanji, I can't thank you enough for being in here. Thanks so much. And I know you're working on not just Raider stuff here, but covering the entire NFL. Tell us about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I covered the Raiders for 4 to 5 years before I realized that, it's there's so many other teams out there, right? There's so many players that I scout pre-draft that end up going to all these various teams, and I want to follow these guys around. So I think from that point, last year I started the Football Scout channel. That channel's kind of taken off at this point, and this season I'm adding a couple more teams, and the Ravens are actually one of the teams we'll be following a little bit closely this season. They got some good offensive linemen, one of my favorite centers in the NFL, right? I think one of the best centers in the NFL too. But I'm excited to cover the Ravens this season. I'll be covering them on the Football Scout channel, but I'm excited for the Ravens in general as well. They got some young football players. They got guys under contract, and they're ready to compete. And I don't know if that's the general census around the NFL with this Ravens team, right? When you ask who's the best team in the NFL, people are oftentimes saying the Chiefs. Some people say the Bills, the Bengals, the Cowboys. But I think the Ravens are right up there as well, right? They're not that far away from competing. I mean, you can say, would you personally be shocked if the Ravens won the Super Bowl this year?
No, not at all. I think part of it is that people expect the Ravens to be good every year. And they're like, all right, the Ravens will be there, but it's kind of like the way we get spoiled as Ravens fans. I think the national media gets spoiled with us too and just takes us for granted and always wants to look for something else. But I mean, I can tell you when Lamar Jackson's on his game and with Tom Monken here now, trying to bring it out, giving him autonomy at the line of scrimmage, which is, oh man, Greg Roman's scheme drove us crazy as fans because it was so methodical and so controlled. Like the quarterback didn't have much control. So just taking the reins off of Lamar and letting him throw. And you scouted him at Louisville. Obviously, he's got a tremendous arm, tremendous touch. Right. So if he's hot, I mean, he can score with anybody. We've seen that when the Ravens have gone to 2-minute drills in the past and to have situations, competitive situations, the Ravens score. But then we'll go back to holding the ball, running the ball too much. So, yeah, really optimistic. I'm glad that you said that. And I can't wait, man. So make sure you have me on. You got your boy on now, too, if you ever need some help.
Absolutely. I appreciate that.
So, hey, I have to ask you about Rocky Scene. Now, he was drafted, of course, in 2019, very high pick.
Right.
You're a draft guy. I'm a draft guy. Temple tough, physical player. He spent 3 years in Indy. Last year was in Vegas with the Raiders.
Yep.
So he's our starting cornerback. He's going to be starting opposite Marlon Humphrey. He signed a 1-year contract, $4 million, void years added on there. So the cap hit's pretty small. Sanji, what did you see? Let's start with the good.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think Rocky Yacine's one of those guys that he's young, right? And I think that's the first thing people have to remember. There's guys in the NFL that they legit develop over time, right? Sometimes we see guys that come in year one and they're, the best player in the NFL, right? But that doesn't happen with most players, right? Most players, it takes some time to develop. And I would argue that outside of the quarterback position, the quarterback position is the hardest position in the NFL, right? It's the position where you have to be fast, you have to be athletic, you have to be quick, you have to be strong, you have to be everything, right? Because there's so many different types of receivers that you have to cover week in and week out, right? And I think with Rocky Yacine, he does have a naturally smaller frame, and I think with that, you may see him struggle a little bit with guys that are a little bit stronger, guys that are a little bit bigger, but he's still very good, right? I don't want to use the word very good, but he is a good, productive football player, right? Last season, he gave up 58% of catches to be completed, which is pretty good, right? And I think sometimes when it comes to with cornerbacks, people are kind of expecting the next, Darrelle Revis or the next Nnamdi Asomugha. Guys are going to shut people down. But, in the NFL today, it's a passing league. right? Teams are going to throw the ball. They're going to design the newest concepts, the best schemes to attack through the air, right? And I think for a team like the Baltimore Ravens, you're going to get a lot more production out of this corner than you may expect, right? Plus, he's going into year 5. He's going to get better and better and better, right? So to me, I think this is a good, solid starter. Will he have 7 interceptions this year and be a top 5 corner? Probably not. But what he is he's a role player within the defense that already has their true number 1 cornerback. They have a up-and-coming young safety. They have a really, really good set of linebackers, a good defensive line as well with some young talent. And I think Rocky Sin will just kind of play his role within that defense.
That'll work because, I mean, we've seen here so far in training camp, the quarterbacks are hesitant to test Marlon Humphrey. And Marlon, as you know, his style, he's not someone who baits you. He's all over his guy. So it's just natural for quarterbacks to see that and go to the other side. So when Marcus Peters was out, for example, whoever was over there is getting plenty of action. So the Ravens are going to need a big year from Rock. Football Scout, you mentioned the interceptions. I think he only has two career picks throughout his career. So not a lot of ball skills, but that wasn't his thing coming out of Temple. He was just a guy who would give you a rough ride down the field. So and then there's something else I wanted to ask you about here. The Ravens have switched from Wink Martindale to Mike Macdonald, defensive coordinator. Stark contrast where Wink stresses the cornerbacks as hard as you can possibly stress them with all these heavy blitz, not just 5-man blitz, 6, 7, 0 blitz, send him. Whereas Mike Macdonald is content to sit the cornerbacks back in zone. So I wanted to ask you about Rock playing in the zone defense, being disciplined, being able to pass off his responsibilities. How does he look in zone?
Yeah, so I think the big thing with Rock is he has good hips. He's fluid, right? So with that, he can also move really, really well. And I know you mentioned he only has 2 interceptions, but in his career, he also has gotten his hands on the football 20 times, right? That's 20 total pass breakups. And that's important because we've seen a trend over the last 5 to 7 years with guys that are into analytics that if you're able to get your hands on the ball, that oftentimes leads into being able to force turnovers or getting those interceptions. So I think with the guy like Yasin, if you're blitzing and you're putting him in a situation where he just has to kind of read and react, I think there's a chance for him to have some more interceptions. I think, if you look at Rocky Sin prior to this season and you say that's kind of what you're going to expect, I think you're not considering the defensive schemes in the NFL, the different coaches and the different expectations among players. I think this season, I do think he'll have his best career season, right? I think he's on the best defense he's been in the course of his career. He has the best guys kind of around him over the course of his career. So naturally, I think he's going to play better this season.
Football Scout with us. Thank you so much on that. So, yeah, big expectations for him, though. And, a lot of us Ravens fans wanted Marcus Peters back, the comfort food. We know him. He's with the Raiders now, obviously. Right. So we did a little trade up there. But that was part of the thing with Marcus. I would say to you and to Raiders fans out there that the fit here with Mike Macdonald and Marcus Peters wasn't the best fit. If you just watched it, you can cherry pick that Jacksonville Jaguars game. Look at the touchdowns we gave up down the right sideline on Marcus Peters' side, and you can see how much trouble he had passing off zone in the discipline. So hoping for a better fit there with Rock Ya-Sin.
Yep.
Moving on. Another player you're familiar with here, John Simpson. He was a 4th-round pick, I believe 2020, wasn't too long ago. And, yes, he started 21 games out of 35 games played. First thing that stands out to me, Sanjit, is 14 penalties when I was looking it up. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think John Simpson's an interesting player because he didn't really get I should use this lightly. He did have the opportunity to play, but I feel like with Simpson, it wasn't how the Raiders utilized him wasn't correct in my opinion. First and foremost, they should have started him and let him play every single week at one position and let him train there and just go forward with him as the starter because John Simpson's a starting caliber guard in the NFL, right? And, talk a little bit about development. There's no position that develops more than offensive line with experience, right? Guys could be very average players in college. Maybe they're average tackles in college. They come into the NFL, they translate or transition over into like guard or center or whatever, and they'll be much better come year 5 than they are in year 1. And I think John Simpson's kind of one of those guys. He obviously didn't work out with the Raiders, but the big difference is he was drafted under the John Gruden, Mike Mayock regime. And this new regime, which was the Josh McDaniels, Dave Ziegler regime, obviously didn't want to keep him around, right? Simpson did start for the Raiders coming in, and they ended up swapping him out with Dylan Parham, as well as, the other guard position is not 100% set yet, but John Simpson was starting for the Raiders, right? And I do think that he was getting better and better and better, right, as the seasons kind of went along. But I wouldn't, I would be lying if I didn't tell you guys that I wasn't the biggest John Simpson fan coming out of college. Right? I was not the biggest fan, but he did definitely do some things that impressed. He's strong as hell, physical as hell. And it's interesting because, when you look at John Gruden, they ran a heavy zone scheme, right? Zone blocking specifically, inside zone, outside zone. And Josh McDaniels runs a heavy power scheme. And I would assume that John Simpson would fit that power scheme a little bit better, but he really struggled in the power scheme, right? So I think John Simpson may have more success in a more zone-heavy scheme. And I believe the Ravens, at least last year, they weren't heavy one way or the other. I'm pretty sure they were pretty inside zones, outside zones, power runs, dual man, all that stuff. I'm pretty sure they were pretty consistent across the board, right? I don't think they were like super heavy one way or the other. But with Gruden, it was like super far left to the zone, and then with Daniels, it's super far right with power, right? Like you couldn't have two guys that were more different, right? And I think John Simpson just didn't fit the scheme, but I do think he's going to be a good football player. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up starting at left guard for the Ravens. I believe right now you got the tackle from Oregon that's starting, right, getting those first-team reps. I don't want to butcher his name, but I think is it?
Come on, give it a try.
Okay, I'm gonna give it Malasala Amuvave Lualu.
Yeah, hey, that's pretty good. Big Sala Mauve Laulu. I always feel like I have to reset my mouth after I say it.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's running with the first team. Go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I had to bust on you a little bit about the name.
Yeah, let's talk about him a little bit. I'll be the first to tell you guys. When he was with Oregon, I watched his tape. And I watched him early on in the process, right? Back in January, I started watching his tape. I was not really a fan of his game, right? Coming out of college, and this is just me being honest, right? I don't want to lie to you or your followers. I was not a fan of his game, and I said, I don't know if this guy's going to get drafted. I don't know if this guy's going to make an active roster, right? His technique wasn't very good. He wasn't very consistent, but he did have one thing that I think if a team really liked it and they wanted to develop him, long term, you give him 2 years to develop. Year 3, he can become an all-pro guard, right? That's kind of the upside that this guy has. He was strong as hell, physical, body type, massive, lengthy. You can take that guy and mold him into kind of what you want. Now, I know he's taking first-team reps at left guard, right? Is the general consensus that he's starting right now for the Ravens?
It's an open competition. The most interesting thing now is that Ben Cleveland doesn't seem to be part of it. But with Big Sala, a couple of things. I've said this before on the channel. His vertical drop, his kick step. When I first saw it, I automatically took him off my board. Try to be selective with my draft board. But after we drafted him, I went back and watched him. The one thing I think he was very underrated on is his ability to climb to level 2. Just because he looks segmented and non-athletic, heading backwards, heading forward, he's a different type of person. You also mentioned development a couple of times here. The Ravens have an excellent offensive line coach in Joe D. Delos Angeles, you talking about Matt Skura's, Bradley Bozeman's, all up and down our line, Rick Wagner. So getting back to, there's a chance that Big Sala could start, and they seem to want him to start. But what I wanted to ask you about Simpson is, given what I told you, given what I just said about Joe D, is Simpson's strong, big, strong guy. Is it more about his technique? Like, is that what led to the inconsistencies? I know you said he got moved around a lot, but is it just like more technique stuff that he's got to clean up, or is it just maybe he doesn't have the athletic ability to keep up with some of these defensive linemen?
Yeah, the thing that I've noticed with Simpson is it's more of the mental processing. with him, right? And I'll give you an example. I can't remember when it was. It was 2 seasons ago. He was starting at the left guard position, and these defensive linemen are running these games, right? They're running stunts, and John Simpson was struggling to process that part of it, right? So you can say it's maybe athletic as well as being able to process it. Teams would also delay blitz on his side, and he wouldn't be able to kind of pick that up in time. So for me, I think with John Simpson, the big thing is the mental processing part of it. And us fans, sometimes we don't think about it, right? That the mental aspect of it is a big thing, because the speed of the game is faster from college into the NFL. Every person is stronger and bigger, but then the coaches are smarter too, right? If John Simpson makes one mistake, right, he can't pick up a defensive line game, a delayed blitz, he doesn't see it. The next week, the same coach is going to come out and do that same exact thing, right? And that was kind of what was happening with Simpson. I remember like back to back, maybe it was 3 weeks back to back, they would delay blitz on him, and he wouldn't be able to pick it up. Now, he obviously picked it up a couple times, but he did struggle at times too, right? Leading to like sacks and quarterback hits. I think there was one game specifically where he ended up losing the game for the Raiders because he didn't pick a guy up on like 3rd down. We ended up punting, never got the ball back, right? So I think with John Simpson, a lot of it is mental. And the positive thing with the mental part of it is every person gets better from a mental standpoint in the NFL. 100% of people get better. So that is what I would have hope with John Simpson, right? Is that he kind of continues to improve.
Yeah, the Ravens have a type, and they want a big body next to our guy Linderbaum. Obviously, a little bit undersized, but the left guard spot. I mean, Scout, you're just playing between Linderbaum and Ronnie Stanley. No. You have help. You have a lot of intelligence between those two. No. So this battle should be really interesting to see. I'm a little bit surprised, first of all, that Ben Cleveland isn't in the mix, because when he's played, there's been splashes of greatness mixed in with splashes of what the heck is he doing. You would figure, like you said, the mental game would get better with Ben Cleveland. A lot of fans here in Baltimore point to John Harbaugh's doghouse and say Cleveland might be in the doghouse and so on and so forth. Whether there's merit to that, I don't know. But it does seem to roll that way, if I had to be completely honest with you. So, a big body next to Linderbaum, and who's somebody who's going to be helped out with Ronnie Stanley. But this preseason is going to be really interesting to watch. Big, solid John Simpson battling it out, because both of them are going to have a chance to earn their spot. And the Ravens really don't want to use Patrick McCary at left guard, because he's their 3rd tackle. He's their swing tackle. He's very valuable. He might be our backup center, because we're having a lot of problems behind Linderbaum with that second team just getting overwhelmed by our big defensive line. Yeah. So, you want McCary to be this 6th man, what he's paid to do. So, yeah, any final thoughts on John Simpson before we move on to another corner?
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit about the offensive line. Let's just talk about some of the other guys, right? Sam Mustipher is coming over from the Bears. The Football Scout, one of the 3 main teams I covered last year was the Bears, and Mustipher started for the Bears, right? At least he played a lot for the Bears, right? Is he considered is he struggling right now in camp? Is that kind of the general?
Yeah, it's he's in there. Mustipher's in there, but we also have a couple of undrafted guys.
Okay. Yeah, it's interesting, because I would expect Mustipher to be a solid backup center. He'd play a little bit of guard if you needed him to. But the guy that I actually really like, and I'm not sure if Ben Cleveland will end up being the starting left guard. I'm going to assume that that would kind of make the most sense, right? Maybe the coaching staff has Saleh in there at the moment to maybe push his development along. But I think Ben Cleveland makes sense. But even beyond that, I think the guy that has the most upside is Andrew Voorhees. And I know he's not playing this year, right? I'm pretty sure he's going to be out.
He's pretty much out, and Harbaugh admitted that, which is something he don't usually do. But yeah, this is a redshirt season for him to get healthy. And by the way, Ben Cleveland, he's running with the 2nd team behind Zeitler at right guard. So they're not even playing him at left guard right now.
That's interesting. That's definitely interesting, because you would expect him to kind of transition over to that left side and just be the guy, right? But that makes sense. I think, I don't think the offensive line is going to be an issue for the Ravens this year. I know there's question marks, right, kind of going in, but I don't think it's going to be an issue at all. I think this offensive line, you have a good left tackle, you have a good center, you have a good right guard, you have a good right tackle. you only just need to figure that left guard position out.
That's right.
But you have like 6 guys that can probably play like left guard, right? So I think the Ravens offense line's going to be very good this year, and I look forward to kind of following them this year for sure.
Yeah, it's a good group. It's a very talented team overall, but the O-line, definitely important. You talk about pass game and the rush game, how that rush game is going to come along with a new offensive coordinator. So there's a lot of mental to pick up, which again goes back to Big Saleh,
Right.
with no experience at guard, trying to pick up a whole new system like this, just really surprising. So definitely scout, something to watch out in the preseason. So Trayvon Mullen, now he was a player I like too. I like the ball skills coming out of Clemson. He was drafted, 6 spots behind Rocky Sin in 2019, first 3 seasons with the Raiders. So he's a guy that well. Guy I liked in the draft. I'm sure you probably did too. I bet you're probably pretty excited about that pick for his upside.
Yep.
By the way, Lamar Jackson's cousin.
Right.
Just a little backstory. He was cut a couple of days ago with a failure to disclose injury. He was signed to $1 million guaranteed contract. Thought the relationship was over. The next day, he re-signs with the Ravens. He is now on the non-football injury list. But you would have to imagine that his contract's been restructured to where they can cut him without, wasting any money on his spot. So, Trayvon Mullen, after the setup, what do you have for me?
Yeah. First and foremost, I'm a big Trayvon Mullen fan, right? Kind of similar with the Rocky Sin, right? Development is the key part here. But when you talk about a guy with ball skills, Trayvon Mullen has it, right? And I think Trayvon Mullen fits better in his zone scheme than he does in a man scheme. And I say that because when you look at a guy like Rocky Sin, he's faster, he's quicker, he's has the better hip fluidity. Mullen's not as fluid, and I think that's kind of clear when you watch his tape. He's not as fluid. But when guys aren't as fluid, maybe they're going to be a little bit better in zone coverage, and I think that's where Mullen's going to make his money. I think for a team like the Baltimore Ravens to, hopefully he gets healthy. Is there any sort of, do they know how long he'll be out for? Has that been reported?
No, it's been kind of mysterious with him.
Okay.
Not a lot of information coming out. So, yeah, we got to get him on the practice field too. But It's just a really interesting, competition here, Sanji, because, we're here stressed about who's going to be the cornerback 3. Is it Brandon Stevens? Is Pepe Williams going to step up? Jalen Armour Davis, we have no idea what's going on with him. He hasn't looked good when I personally put eyes on him. Caillou Blue Kelly, not an athlete. You talked about what it takes to be an NFL corner. Caillou Blue, it's just kind of a underwhelming pick. So you got guys like Daryl Worley, Kayvon Seymour, and then this guy, Trayvon Mullen. Like, I just see the upside in him. And you mentioned the zone corner. So a lot of interest here, especially for me, and whether he can stick on this roster.
Right. And he has 22 pass breakups. He has 4 interceptions. I think when he came in as a rookie, the first thing that stuck out to me is like how many dropped interceptions this guy had. And I think that kind of continued over the course of his career. But I think like from a snap count perspective, he hasn't played a whole lot, right? He went to, with the Raiders in 2021, he only played like 230 snaps. He went to the Cardinals, spent some time with the Cowboys the following year, 160 snaps, right? From his rookie season and second season where he averaged, 750 snaps in each of those seasons, he's kind of been, regressing a little bit, right, with the snap count. And I think that may hinder his development a little bit, but I think the more playing time he kind of gets, the more you'll kind of get out of Mullen. If there's one quarterback that's going to have success that's young, if you ask me between Mullen and Rocky Sin and maybe some of the other guys, I think Mullen has the most upside, right? Because he has the ball skills. And I don't want to underestimate that part of it, right? Very, very smart football player when it comes to being able to recognize patterns and those type of things. He's a guy that I like. So I think for the Ravens, you only need one other cornerback opposite of Marlon. I think you guys are in a good spot kind of with that secondary. And, of course, you got guys like Marcus Williams, and I love Kyle Hamilton. He's one of my favorite safeties coming out last year. And you got some depth behind those guys as well. I think the cornerback position for the Ravens is in a good spot. Daryl Worley actually also played with the Raiders a couple seasons back. He was another guy that I really liked. He had
a really good game against Jamar Chase at Cincinnati. down the
Right.
stretch when he was asked to play. It's
Yeah.
kind of eye opening. I mean, and I think he's kind of been Daryl Worley. Just speaking of it quick, people overlook him. He's
Yeah.
played some quality football and somehow has gotten lost in the shuffle.
Yeah, it's the cornerback position, man. It's difficult. It's really really difficult. 'Cause people don't think about how physically gifted you have to be. How the mental aspect of it. It's hard. It is the hardest position outside of the quarterback position to play.
Yeah, and we talked earlier. I mentioned, this is a very picky fan base, especially when it comes to defense. You think about all the corners that the Ravens have had in their history, some cornerstone players, even guys like Ladarius Webb.
Yeah.
We've always had good corners, all the way back to Samari Roll, Dwayne Starks, Chris McAllister, Jimmy Smith. It's just been a stacked position. So it's kind of rare for us, Sanjit, where it's just like we have some questions here. And my out of the box question for you: if Mullen steps up, he gets healthy, he gets on the practice field, he starts making noise, we realize, hey, we might have something in this guy where he can go get the ball. And we continue to have struggles in the slot, which is what's really burned us last year. We had to move Kyle Hamilton to the slot because we did not have a slot corner. Rocky Scene seems like the kind of guy being physical with the fluid hips where he might be able to move to slot. What would be your outside the box idea, moving Rock inside?
Yeah, I think that's actually a great fit to put Rock into that slot position. I know with the Colts, he played a little bit of slot. Raiders, not a whole lot, but he did play a little bit in the slot as well when he had to a couple games. I would not be surprised if he was kind of asked to transition over into that slot position. I think that would be a natural fit for him. And I think the Colts tried it because of the fact that he has those fluid hips. He has the ability to turn, and kind of run with guys. At slots, obviously way different than playing on the outside. I think it's much harder. In my opinion, it's much harder. But I think that is definitely a natural transition over for a guy like Rock.
So we're going to need to see Trayvon Mullen on the field here.
Right.
It's just, that's the key to me because I'm with you. I'm a draft nerd. I know, both of us work hours tirelessly on the draft. And, when I see players that I loved, this is why I was so excited to have you on, because I needed to know what the hell happened to Rock. Like, I loved him. He physical. He looked like he was going to stick. Trayvon Mullen, the ball skills jumped out at Clemson, the instincts. And once he gets going, he is rangy. I wanted to ask one more question about Rock, though. So we get these training camp clips, and they're classic training camp clips. They slow it down. The ball's coming out of Lamar's hand, but they don't want to give away anything that's happening on the field. And then maybe they follow the ball and it looks real, the cinematography, it looks great. Then you see the receiver catch the ball, and then you see Rock a few steps back. Do you have a problem giving up the deep ball or biting on double moves or everything? Because, it hasn't been a great camp so far. It's only so many padded practices. Today's number 2, but we've seen them, like I said, they're avoiding Marlin. They're attacking Rock. So the play of the day has been like over Rock almost, every day, it seems like.
Yeah. Here's the thing with camp. And I love camp. I break down camp footage on the Football Scout channel, right? So I don't want to be hypocritical here, but the thing with camp footage is there's 40, 50, 60 passes a day, right? Between 7-on-7s, 11-on-11s, and then you look at the fact that we had a non-padded portion of practice versus a padded practice. I think a lot of these clips, especially early on, don't matter a whole lot, right? Guys are still trying to get back into football shape. Right. Anyone that's played knows there's a massive difference between being physically in shape and then being in football shape.
Oh, yeah.
Completely different shapes. And I think right now, if the clip of the day or whatever it may have been was on Rock Ya-Sin, we don't know the coverage. We don't know if there was confusion on the back end. I think there's a lot to definitely think and kind of consider with those things.
It is, but double moves, getting burnt deep, not something that you question with Rock.
Not at all. Not at all.
All right, okay, because we've seen them in the rear view. I know people are thinking about it, but like you said it beautifully, man. It's practice. Don't get too high, don't get too low on anybody, and we have no context within those clips. Like I tried to overdo it at the beginning, telling you, but you can't really see what's going on until the end. So Sanji, I really I so much appreciate you coming
Absolutely.
on. Like you said, and I mean it too. If you ever need any kind of partner to spar with on the Football Scout channel, I don't ask anything. I'm always willing to contribute. You know, I'm football is family type of guy. Draft nerd, fellow film nerd. So, yeah, we're kind of brothers from another, man. We're the kind of brothers from another. So, go ahead.
I really appreciate you having me on, man. I really do appreciate it. I know it's been kind of tough. You asked me a couple times, and I get busy. Something comes up, but I love coming on and talking football with anyone. So I always look forward to doing these type of things.
Well, we thank you so much, man. And again, Sanjit's Football Scout links will be below. All his stuff will be below. I'll make sure I get all that organized so I don't miss anything. And please follow him along his NFL journey, because I can tell you, if I didn't respect what he does, not only his work, but his perspective, like the man knows what he's talking about when he's watching film. I've watched the same film as him. We come to a lot of the same conclusions. I really respect his perspective, and he knows his stuff. So go ahead, give him a follow on Twitter. Go ahead, subscribe to his channel. Check out the content. At least support him. Click on the video. Give him a like. Football is family, and Sanjit is part of my football family. I really appreciate it. So with that, I want to say thank you to my football family. Love my football family. And with that, the Football Scout. Say goodbye to the people now.
Thank you, man.